Hey Ryan, how do I get project-based learning started at my school? I've gotten some form of this question nearly every day for the last decade from engaged educators just like you. So at Magnify Learning, we've created a free download to get you started. Whether you're a superintendent, principal, coach, or teacher, go to whatispbl.com to get started on your project-based learning journey today. Are you ready to bring project-based learning to your school? The PBL Simplified podcast will help equip you for your PBL journey with weekly need-to-knows, engaging interviews, PBL showcases from facilitators in the classroom, and PBL leadership episodes to move you towards a successful implementation of PBL. Because every learner deserves to be a part of an inspiring story, and we see daily that project-based learning helps make this happen. If you want me to answer your PBL need-to-know on the podcast, visit whatispbl.com and click on Ask Ryan to submit your question. Welcome to PBL Simplified Podcast in episode 100. This is the century episode. Fired up to be into three digits with our podcast. We've been doing this for 4 years or so, and we love hearing from you so that your voice is in this podcast, and we want to continue to make it valuable for you. So just like the intro says, go to whatispbl.com, hit that Ask Ryan button so that I can answer your PBL need-to-knows here on the podcast. It also happens to fall on a podcast guest episode. So really fired up for my guest, Carmen Coleman. If you were in Kentucky, you likely know Carmen and her work, whether it was from UK Next Gen, JCPS, or now she's with OVEC. But in some way, she's always collaborating to create these really great outcomes for learners. And Carmen and I have known each other for a very long time. Even as she's been in different roles, we've always stayed connected, which is where I want to tie in our need to know for the day. Our need to know today is one that I came up with because leaders don't usually ask it until they're in trouble. And it's, how do I stay grounded as a leader? This is one of those self-care questions that we have. How do we, like as I like to say, how do you get to your best work? Your best work is 10 years out. How do we make sure you get there? And one of the best ways to do that is relationships. Sometimes we call it a PLN, a professional learning network. It's those folks that even if you only connect once or twice a year, as soon as you do, you just pick up where you left off, right? Because you know both of you are energetic, you're passionate about the work, you're busy. Like you both understand that. You're going to respect each other's time, but you also know you're in the work for the right reasons. You have to stay connected to those people. So if you've got some of those people, think about them right now. Maybe somebody you connect with at a conference, and you're like, that was such a great conversation. Can I encourage you to reach out again? Just, hey, let's connect in the morning sometime for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Put a time frame on it because, again, you're both busy, but this is important for both of you. You need to connect with like-minded people. And can you do it every week in a mastermind? Yes, you can. And it's very worthwhile. We've got some masterminds here in Magnify Learning and our ecosystems that we can plug you into where you have a group of like-minded leaders that are connecting every week on different topics, but also socially, like what's going on in your life so that you've got somebody else that's listening. Because as leaders, we can get really, really lonely at the top because there's some things that you can't share with your staff. Right? So you need to have these relationships. Your work's really important. And as we get into our big goal of having 51% of schools doing project-based learning by 2051, 51 by 2051, one of the things we realize is we can't just go on offense. We can't have every traditional school or traditional classroom going to PBL. We also need to play some defense. Those people that are doing project-based learning right now and doing it well, we need to keep them in the game. And we need to do some succession planning. So out of that work has come this idea that we need you to be doing this work at a high level for a long time in the same position for there to really be some succession planning to do. You need to be doing PBL at a high level for 10 years. I made up that number, but it needs to be a place where you've trained your own people, you've hired your own people, you've created a culture that people understand, and you've had time to bring in your successor. So to do all of that, it comes back to relationships. Relationships within your district, within your school, but also outside of your district and school. Who else is doing this at a high level? One of the things I love about education is once you get out of your county, you're not really competing with other schools. You might be competing for students right now, right? Like that's a real thing. But once you get outside of that, you're really collaborating, right? Like you need to have some people. So I bring that up because Carmen and I have been talking learner outcomes for a very long time. And we're both in positions where we're very busy. We can't always connect all the time. But as soon as we do, we pick up right where we left off because we know that we're both super passionate about education outcomes and we're super passionate about this work. So it's really easy to just jump back in and find some new connections and further each other's work. So that's our need to know for today is how do you continue this work 10 years from now so that you're still going and still going strong and not cynical? It's relationships, it's connections, it's your strong network. But today in episode 100, we've got Carmen Coleman from OVEC, that is Ohio Valley Education Cooperative, which again, we're talking networks here, and your need to know is that it's about connecting schools, connecting leaders, so you're sharing ideas, you're collaborating, and you're getting to your best work that's 10 years out. Carmen and I are going to have a great conversation. So as you tune in, I hope that you get to pull out all kinds of nuggets that you can grab for yourself, take back to your school and your staff and your learners. Enjoy. All right, PBL Simplified podcast listeners, this is episode 100. This is the century session, and we have a guest that will match that. Today, we've got Carmen Coleman on the podcast, and Carmen brings a ton of energy and experience to education from, I don't know how far to go back with her bio, from superintendent to UK Next Gen to the largest district in Kentucky. Now she's doing educational co-op work, but it's all framed in deeper learning and project-based learning. So we've got the right person when we talk about leadership in PBL. Carmen, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to see you again. And I follow you, I love your quotes that come out every day, little tidbits. And we're still trying to really move the ball forward here in Kentucky.
Right. It's moving the work forward. And Carmen and I have gone way back and been in the weeds on the ground doing this work and, gone to do some different things and coming back. So it is fun to be, I guess not in person, but on Zoom doing the podcast, right? Super close, close. Yeah. And I think one of the things that draws us together each time, Carmen, is just this shared value system around what education should be. And just we say deeper learning, but this deep need to turn from a system that might not be serving all of our learners well. I wrap that up into that's my why for education. So can you just start right there? What's your why for being in education?
I recognized really early, even as a new teacher, and I have a dog that wants to talk a little bit. I'll do something different with her if she doesn't quit. I recognize that things did not make sense to me with the way that we did school. It just did not make sense to me. And I would ask questions about that even as a new teacher. What's magical about 175 days or 177 days and why? I mean, just, why are we in isolated silos for subject areas? And then I realized that kids could do so much more than we give them credit for, or that we allow them to do. And so I just started, for me, it just became then, not only can they do more than we think they can do, but they can do more than they think they can do.
Yeah, that's good.
And I just really have become, I went into education, I think because it felt like home. I wasn't going to be a teacher like many of us whose family, you have teachers. My mom's a teacher. My aunts are teachers. I was not going to do that. But then I took one education class finally, and it was like home, right? And but then getting into it, there were just so many questions for me, and I just became really intent on helping kids realize their potential and helping adults realize that we were we're the difference makers there. And so that is what I think has really driven me the past several years.
Yeah, that's so good. And we always like to acknowledge the passion that teachers in the classrooms have, whether you're doing PBL or not, right? It's like, we're the difference makers. Like, that's why we're there.
That's right.
And then it seems like we're just on this journey. I like that you start your why with questions, right? Like, here you are, superintendent of a school, and it's like, well, why? Like, what does our diploma mean? Right? Like, I love that you just asked that question. And then you asked a bunch of different stakeholders, like, what do you want your kids to leave with when they leave our school system?
That's
right. Those questions are so important. How do you do that? Like, how do you reach out to stakeholders like that? And where did that curiosity come from?
Again, what does our diploma mean? We were on a journey in that district trying to figure out, what does school need to be today? Because we had gotten to the point, and we're still there in so many ways, that, the state accountability system was the Super Bowl. That test was it. And it just seems so short-sighted to me. I started to realize that we really limited kids' opportunities, because if it wasn't tested, we didn't feel like we had time to do it. Like world language. There's an example. That was a real example. And so, as we started to see a few schools, there weren't very many to see, but at that time, like 2010, 2012, schools that had set their sights higher, that had gotten above the turbulence of accountability and standardized tests, and were thinking bigger about what was possible for kids. And so, we saw in those schools some real commonalities. And one of those was the project-based approach. And the kids were doing real work, authentic work, solving real life problems. And it was just so different than anything I had ever seen before. I didn't know that school could look that way. And so we started with some project-based learning, but then we were still like, okay, but so what's the end game? All right, so we're ready to do it. We're ready for the grand reopening. Here's what schools should be. But we felt like, so does that mean everybody's project-based? What are we trying to accomplish? And that's when we asked that question, what does our diploma mean? And the best we could do consistently was to say, well, it means they can't come back. Or it means they've served their time. Oh, it means they've met some very minimum standards.
Carmen, I'll give you this. There was a school, and I won't say their name, but their mission and vision was to transition kids to their next experience.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, as the principal would say, who read it, well, death is a transition, right? Like, we're just transitioning kids, not like improving where they're at, not giving them new tools, like not redefining their world or new. It was just, we're just transitioning kids. They're just moving through.
Which they're going to do with or without us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So how do we use this time well?
That's right. That's right. And that's what I used to think about, and I still do. The diploma should be a ticket. So when I would hand a kid their diploma, I would think of it as a ticket. But I would wonder, a ticket to what? Because what I was seeing was that kids that had all these plans and for the future, you could ask them as seniors, what are you going to do? What's your next step? They could tell you. But what I quickly realized was that those were wishes. They weren't plans. They weren't plans. They didn't know how to navigate the system, whether it was the college, that's hard, the college application process and the scholarships, or if you want to go to the military it's hard. That's hard stuff. And I realized that the kids who were doing that had parents that were driving it for the most part. Sure. And we weren't. And the inequities were just glaring.
Yeah, one of my favorite courses I ever taught in middle school was a first generation college course. And we just talked about those things, right? Yeah. Like, I'm super blessed. Like, my dad was the first in his family to go to college. So, like, right, he had gone over some of those hurdles. Now, we hadn't gotten that far. He was an engineer, so I went to go be an engineer. Right? We just knew that engineer was a path, right? And I ended up, education was really my passion. Right. Man, sitting in that class with 30 kids that didn't have anybody in their network that had been to college, like, they just had great questions. And like, what's financial aid? Like, what's it look like to go onto a campus? We would watch videos of campus just so they could see what campus was, or take a visit. And I always say, like, it doesn't blow their minds. It's not like, but it's like, beep. It's just a little bigger. Right.
A little bigger. That's exactly right. And that really became my passion, was we've got to help kids think bigger than what they're thinking. We've got to expose them as best we can to the world, right? Because they're so limited, so many to their only what they know, only what their experience has given them. And so what I realized was then what we have to do for each other as educators is to help one another see what I saw in those schools that we visited. Mm-hmm. Those project-based, performance-based kinds of places.
Well, and you hit on, like, this is something we just talked about in the podcast, is, as you're looking to implement PBL or deeper learning into your school or your district, like, one of the first steps we say is to go visit, go look, go ask questions, right? Go find the kid that you don't think is paying attention and ask them a question.
Just go talk to them. That's right. And they'll tell you everything you want to know. For us, answering that diploma question, what does our diploma mean? Well, of course, we couldn't answer it then. And so then we started talking about, well, what do we want it to mean? What does our community want that diploma to represent? And what do the kids want? What do their families want? And so then we had a North Star. Okay, this is what we want. This is what the diploma will mean. Unfortunately, once this kind of the craze started with the graduate profile, which we didn't even know we were just trying to answer that question. We didn't know there was this other conversation going on. But what I've seen is that some schools and districts stop there. And it looks nice. It's a poster. Right. They got great graphics hanging up in places. But then that's no better than the mission statement. Right. And I know it's important to establish a vision and a mission, but if you don't bring those to life, if you don't leverage those to improve the student experience, it's not doing any good. It's a nothing. And so that, for me, that this became a living mission statement. Mm-hmm. And so the question was, then how do we know that it's happening? Right. We're not just going to say it and hang it on the wall and it's going to magically happen. And what started to happen was that, as teachers, it was like, oh gosh, if that's what they have to have, then what kinds of experiences do we need to provide so that they do have those skills, that we've promised that they'll have. And so, what we wanted was for kids to show evidence. I want to know. It's not enough. I'm not going to let them check a box. I want to know. I want to see, what evidence can you show me that is happening, that you are indeed building on those skills.
The evidence is important too, Carmen, right? Because as teachers, we say, well, I taught collaboration, so obviously they can all collaborate. Like I taught that, but that doesn't necessarily mean they learned it and can apply it, right?
Just like an academic, fact, right? I taught it.
Yeah.
I taught it. I've taught.
You would test it, right?
That's right. That's right. So, and then of course, project-based learning becomes such a wonderful vehicle for cultivating, the application of knowledge, the development and application of those skills. It's just a natural. And what's interesting, I'm sure you have seen this too, when I work with groups and have them go through what are the most essential skills for success. We know academics are important, but we're a school district, right? That's our business. We think we've been doing that, but what else? What else? So I'll ask them, so all right, now if I want to see evidence of these skills, if I want to see artifacts from students learning to know that they're getting it, what kinds of learning experiences do we need to create so that kids can show us artifacts? And I can give any group of people, whether it's a group of community members, a group of factory workers, it does not matter, teachers, you name it, they know what kinds of experiences lead to those skills.
Right.
Perseverance, communication, critical thinking. Everybody knows. Real quickly, they give great examples. Well, we would challenge the kids to plan and grow a garden. And we would challenge them to create a breakout game, or we would challenge them to plan a trip, every part of it, to make all the arrangements, to do all the planning. So they know, they know what to do, but then we go right back into those same old routines. It's interesting.
You get back to the old habits. So you'd say, what are the most important skills, right? That comes from, what does that diploma mean?
That's right.
What kind of experiences help develop these? I think you also added we need to be able to show, right, that these are actually being done.
They've got to show it. What could they show me? And then the last question is always the one that's met with some uncomfortable silence, because, I'll say, well, so I always kind of try to lead them up to it. So you've said these are the most important skills for success. You've looked at a picture of a child that you love, and you've said, this is it. And all right, so we agree on that. So where in your school today, or in your child's school, do kids get these kinds of learning experiences? Because you've said they're the most important. So tell me, how do we do that? And they'll say, well, if they're in robotics, that's a great opportunity for them to collaborate and think critically and to be creative and to be, okay, are all students in robotics? No. All right, give me something else. Well, if they have Mr. Goodwin, he does this awesome lesson where they build catapults and trebuchets, and it's fantastic. Awesome. Does every student get that opportunity to have him? No.
Nope.
And so then you realize we have a real equity problem here. And that whole idea that, well, they've got to have the basics before they can do deeper learning, project-based learning. That is such a widespread myth.
Yep. We've dispelled that myth. We've dispelled that myth, Carmen.
Yeah.
We looked at the Lucas Foundation research that says
Right.
that is not true. Unequivocally, it's not true.
No.
The opposite happens, right? And our kids are not getting problem solving because they're not practicing problem solving, critical thinking. They're just
they're
the basics.
set off. Right. The remediation cycle that they never get out of that path.
Right. Because they never get the context that they need, right? To really get true learning. So it's
interesting. I always like to think about with groups. So how do we learn to swim? How'd you learn to swim? Can you swim? Yeah, everybody can swim. Or how'd you learn to play soccer? And I'll say, well, did your teacher like set you down and make you like, first we're going to learn all the vocabulary terms that have to do with swimming and write those down. And then you're going to look them up and you're going to write the definition. Then you're going to use it in a sentence. They're like, no. I mean, why? I mean, you act like that's crazy, but I mean, that's what we do in school every day, right?
Right,
I mean,
right. You probably got in the pool.
Right. So let's get them in the pool.
Right, that's right. Let's get them in the pool.
Let's get them in the pool.
While we've got you, here's what I'd like you to talk to our listeners about is we've got a pretty diverse audience. A lot of them are leaders. Some are new. They say, hey, I want to learn about PBL, so I'm going to go check out this podcast. Okay. Some are fully in, and they've just been looking for something just like this. Okay. So a lot of our listeners, they get this. They understand, yep, I've got a similar why. Like right now, you've got them stirred up, and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't implement.
Right.
So like, especially like full school and not that you should go full school right away, or a district implementation. You've done this at several different levels, right? Like JCPS is a big district. Yeah. You're at OVEC with multiple schools. How do you keep the momentum and fidelity to this goal? Like if people say, yes, I'm in, how do they stick with it and how do they get it implemented?
What I see is that first, those that stick with it, they've got a North Star. They know what their end game is. They know what they're trying to accomplish.
Carl, I'm going to stop you there for just a second because that's what we talk about, right? We talk about like leaders lead, like that's your job. Like we are going to bring in voice and choice, even with our staff, right? Whether it's teachers, even when it's kids, but it's still our job to lead as leaders, right? So we bring the North Star. We said, this is the best thing for kids. It's good for all of our kids. So all of our kids need to have access to it. Now let's all figure out how we get there, right? But the North Star can come right from the leader.
That's exactly right. And the leader has to be willing to say, I don't have all the answers here. Yep. And this is going to be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes because we don't know. All we know is school as we know it. But we've seen glimpses of something different. And we can wait, but the kids are here today. And so do they not deserve something different and better? And the leader's got to get in there with them and be willing to say, I don't know, but let's go figure it out. Let's go find out.
Yeah, that's great. Like, I love that permission, right? So me as a leader, I'm not going to micromanage this. I'm not going to wait until I've read every possible book and then bring back the perfect plan.
Right.
I'm going to have a North Star and I'm going to say, let's all go together because it's worth it.
Right. That's right. And that's when you get ownership. And that's the inquiry approach, right? I mean, that's what you want. And so you want to create a school environment for all the learners, which also includes the adults.
Yeah, that's good.
They're learners too. And that's, you can't lead in that old, outdated manner that we're trying to get rid of in the classroom, right? You can't lead in one way and expect teachers to do differently.
If you're doing sit and get faculty meetings about project-based learning, we're all in trouble, right? Like we're not going to get there.
That's right. That's right.
Can you share a leadership story of somebody who just got it and then was able to run with that and maybe implement at a school or whatever their level of leadership was, where they were able to keep that momentum going and show that North Star to people?
Yeah. So I think of a leader in JCPS. She's a middle school. First of all, she was a middle school instructional coach. And it was a big deal when she applied to be principal, because in that district, there is a very strong belief that you need to be an assistant principal first.
Okay.
I don't believe that. I think it depends on lots of factors, right?
We have that conversation on here, by the way. Just a quick aside that I could go on forever is like, what does the assistant principal role really mean, and what should it mean?
Right. What I have often seen is that awesome leaders get into that role, and if they're saddled with only management, they lose their skills. And I could go on about that too.
Yeah, sorry, I took you off task. We could totally go there, but let's stay here with the story.
When we started this work in JCPS, she was one that she just got it. She believed in it, and she took it and ran. So then she got to be principal of the school. And this was a school that was very successful in the traditional ways, right? But she was like, this is not good enough. This is not enough for our kids. And she is tenacious about it, but her staff is there with her because she is doing the work with them. And she is continually looking for ways to help them see what happens if we have a bigger idea about what it means to be successful. And I always say to her, I hope that if I was a leader in a building when this was rolled out, that I would implement it just like you have. And I mean, she makes me so proud. And there's so many that do, but she is one that she could have easily not done anything. That school was doing well. They're not on anybody's radar. They're going along. It's good. But man, they are such a shining star. I mean, you should see like her kids' defenses. Unbelievable. And every year they're so much better because she does not let it sit. She now has a full team of student mentors that even after they go on to high school, they come back and help the kids, help get ready for their defenses. She is always looking for instructional insights, looking at the work the students do. She listens, and she always wants feedback. I mean, she always wants feedback, and it's very genuine. And she's humble. She's not afraid to be vulnerable. I mean, she's just, to me, she embodies what servant leadership looks like. And I mean, she's phenomenal.
That's it, right? I mean, she's got the North Star. She has the moral imperative, right? That this is good for kids.
That's right.
And then she's open to reflection, right? It's the process. You just live that process of, I don't have all the answers, and I likely didn't do it perfectly. So tell me so we can all get better.
Help me. Yeah. I mean, she's fantastic. Yeah.
What would you say to our listener that says, I'm close to PBL, I'm close to jumping in, but I'm on the fence? What do you say to that principal that knows this is the right thing to do, but isn't sure how to get there and how to jump in?
I mean, what I would try to do is figure out what are they afraid of? What's the hesitation? And very often the hesitation is, it might be test scores. I'm afraid that if we do that, we're not going to be able to, and that's a reality. Like, we have to help people figure that out, right? So how do you, yes, you can do both. You can get a hold of that turbulence and do better and bigger for your kids. And in fact, they will do better. But,
but I love that because the research shows that they are going to do better, right? Like they're going to have more context, better skills. But I like that you say, let's just say it out loud. Right?
Yeah.
And you can even say that out loud to your leadership team, right? Like, this is the direction we should go, but I'm kind of concerned about this. What do you guys think? Once it's out there, then we can work on it, right?
Then we can work on it, right? But if we don't know what the fear is about, then, we've got to start there. What's holding you back?
And I would even say, listeners, if that was you, like if Carmen just pegged you right there, like, would you go to whatispbl.com and then where it says Ask Ryan, just put that in there. Put your fear in there, right? Like, I'm not sure about test scores. I'm not sure that the staff will fully be on board. Put that in there and we'll make that a podcast episode, right?
Yeah,
and
that's a great idea. Yeah.
Get it out there and talk about it.
That's right. And I promise it's not anything that someone else hasn't really worried about and lost sleep over.
That's so good, especially at this point, right? Like, we've spent a decade or so, right? Like on these same fears. And like, that's what I love is like, now we have a lot of these answers, right? We've got resources, we've got experts.
Right.
Like, we can help you pass that now.
Right. There was a time when we didn't have all those things, but now the support is there.
Yeah.
You just have to use it. Yeah.
It is. It's awesome. And you are a great support to educators all over Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
And now in your role with OVEC, you're going to have a great reach. I'm really excited about how can we best support your work, even at OVEC?
Yeah, I think, gosh, you just keep doing what you're doing. I think one of the things that you've done so well is not only do you do the PBL training but you have also found ways to build capacity with educators, with credentialing, with giving them an endorsement or a signet, whatever. So you're building capacity, and we have to think about that all the time. We can go in and do a training. I can do any kind of training, but we've got to be intentional about, okay, so what happens after we leave, right?
Yeah.
How do we continue to support?
That's so good. And I don't know if this will be public by the time this comes out or not, but we're looking at this idea of having 51% of schools doing project-based learning by 2051. And it's just this ambitious goal. What came out of it as we've been diving into this is that we do have sustainability has always been a part of our work, but we can't let people go back to the traditional, right? Or we have to support these principles and then the succession plan, right? Like, we can't go backwards. We need to keep the sustainability with what we're doing.
That's right. And we can't allow, you alluded earlier to, there's always a next step. People will say, well, we got to get them ready for college, and they don't do that in college. Well, I always like to say, we're all going to die, but we're not going to lie still and wait.
That's right.
Practice.
That's right.
We've got to push on the system. And if all of us push on the system enough, the system will change. I really believe that. But we can't wait. We can't wait for that.
No, we're excited for that tipping point to come.
That's
so,
right.
Carmen, I'm going to put in the show notes a blog from Two Revolutions that gives your story so that people can follow up on that. How else can people connect with you?
I'm on Twitter, so at kids_inspire. They can reach me at my, work email. You're welcome to share that with them. I'm pretty easy to find. So, if someone reaches out and I don't respond, that means I haven't gotten it. So,
there you go. You've been so available, Carmen. It's been fun being on the journey with you and around you and in this space, just to see kind of where you can help inspire our educators. And we know that it all trickles down, like it's all for the kids.
That's right.
And you've been enough defenses to see kids do amazing things.
That's right. That's right. I love the work.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you so much, Carmen. I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you. All right.
All right, friends, that was episode 100 with Carmen Coleman, and that is just the perfect century session to have you get inspired, get fired up about the work, and don't forget about the sustainability of that. Please don't think you have to do it all on your own. Just get a North Star, get some crazy people to follow you, and start moving. And when you do that, you will engage your learners, you'll tackle boredom, and you'll transform your classrooms.